Passchendaele. The last day of the Battle of Passchendaele. This is the anniversary today. I grabbed this photograph from Library and Archives Canada. It wasn't titled, but I believe it could very well be Vine Cottage, which is a significant location in Passchendaele, or outside the village of Passchendaele, for the 3rd Battalion, Queen's Own Rifles, because that's where Colin Barron won his Victoria Cross. Anyway, from there, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the start of World War I, just a little bit of an overview. It started for all intents and purposes in August 1914. Canada was invited to send a contingent of soldiers. The Minister of Militia at the time, which was Sam Hughes in Ottawa, he had at the time a plan with the militia in case war was declared to mobilize the entire Canadian militia. However, when war was declared, he scrapped that plan and basically sent a memo to all 255 regiments in Canada to send drafts to a then developing camp called Valcartier in Quebec. And in the space of 3 weeks, Valcartier not only was developed into an elite military camp, it also contained 60,000 troops. Here in Toronto, the Queen's Own Rifles had a draft of over 900 ordinary ranks, and I think it was 25 officers they sent to Valcartier. We weren't the only regiment to send troops. There was also the 10th Grenadiers sent 400, and Queen's Own Bodyguard sent a small company-sized unit. In Valcartier, the Toronto troops were put in a composite battalion that ended up being called the 3rd Battalion. So if you hear the term 3rd Battalion, you'll hear it quite often in my presentation. That is synonymous with the Queen's Own Rifles, basically, at that time. The only other regiment in Toronto to send troops into the 1st contingent was the 48th Highlanders, and they staffed the entire 15th Battalion. So, the thrust of my presentation is going to be, how do you find your family? Or how do you find your ancestor that served in World War I? Well, we have to pre-qualify. The first thing, obviously, is your family had to be living in Canada. They didn't have to be a citizen. They didn't have to be born in Canada, but they had to be living here. So that's a start, obviously. The second thing is you have to have an idea of their name, particularly the last name and hopefully the surname, and a date of birth if possible. Obviously, if you have a last name like surname like Smith, there are 5,000 Smiths, and if you were a John Smith, well, there's another 600 John Smiths, so that's a problem. But if you have a normal name like Richardson, in my case, Bob Richardson, it's relatively easy because you know my name's going to be Robert, and you know that what my date of birth is. So the first step, and from here on, I'm going to have to use a projector, is to show you what the first step would be. By the way, if anybody has any questions, because there's not too many of us here, just holler out, okay? Oh, that's right. So fortunately, Library and Archives Canada, about 10 years ago, came up with a plan to digitize all the attestation records. Well, there were 600,000 soldiers and personnel that joined ultimately the Canadian Expeditionary Force. So all 6,000 attestation papers have been digitalized. You can try it. It'll be a little bit easier. My face is already done. Okay, that's thinking. It's a senior like myself. There we go, okay. This is the first page or first site you're going to see if you're looking for a soldier in World War I. Library and Archives have, as I explained, digitalized all the attestation papers. So if we were to put a name in here, you put the surname, the given names if you have it. You won't know the regimental numbers. Some of the service files have been digitalized, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So let's say we put church word, and I'll talk about soldier church word in a minute. So you're going to put church word in here, just type it in and submit, and then you're going to come up with something like this. There's church words. There's all the church words that were attested into the Army over the space of 4 years. So the one you've got, because church word is an unusual name, you only have the 11 names. But Sydney is the guy that we're looking for. So let's say you're Sydney church word. I'm going to see if this works. No, it doesn't. Okay. We thought that we might have Wi-Fi, but I guess it's not. It's not actually working. So I've clicked on Sydney church word. Wrong guy. All right, well, let's say I clicked on brother. You do have church word or something.
Top row.
Yeah, that's that. I guess that is the This is what his attestation paper looks like, City Church word. He was, I can tell you right now, because I've done the research on this man, he was a Toronto policeman who joined the 234th Overseas Battalion in September 20th, 1916. Ultimately, he ended up in France with the 3rd Battalion and fought in the Battle of Passchendaele, and there's a story behind that. So that's how you do to find your basic relative. If you don't know the Christian name of your relative, you're just going to go through the names one by one. And like I said, if there's 17, you're in luck. If it's Smith, you're out of luck because you got 5,000. Some of the attestation papers had a different look. Officers, well, let's go to this one. This is a conscript. Military Service Act of 1917, the government of Canada decided they didn't have enough soldiers to continue the war. So conscription was put into place. And this is what a conscription recruit looks like, attestation paper. And there are many, many of these. It doesn't have quite the same detail that the other attestation paper has, but you can see that it describes the man where he was born, his religion, next of kin, the date of the attestation. There's also another type of paper that's the officers, and I apologize, I had these in order when I came in this morning. I plugged in my key, they're totally out of order, so I'm looking for these. This is an officer's attestation paper. So this officer happens to be Albert Angus Richardson. He tested in the 93rd Battalion here in Toronto, although he was from Lakefield. I'm not sure why or how he was in Toronto. He probably was working here. This is his previous military experience. He was in the cadets, now Officer Training Corps at the University of Toronto. This man ultimately got into the war. He did survive the war, but so this is what an officer's declaration paper looks like. Not all officers sign these kind of forms. Some of them just sign the regular form. So now you found your soldier. You want to find out more about a soldier, and what he did and where he fought in the Second World War. The next step you're going to do is to look for his service file, okay? On the same site where you found the soldier, Library and Archives Canada, there will be a link to ordering a service file. And this is what a service file looks like. If I can open it up or expand it. That's the covering record. These are not in order. The way you get the service file from Library and Archives Canada is not necessarily in order. Each page is 40 cents. So you may have a service file like this one, 29 pages, so you're paying a little more than $15. Some of them are 50 pages or more if he fought during the entire war. So on here, but that's not the medal record, but that's information about his next of kin, the date of service. You get a copy of the attestation. This is an original copy. This is attestation paper. So we can make it bigger. This man again was a recruit. Discharge certificate, medical examination certificate, medical files if he was wounded. This is okay. I'm trying to make this bigger, but it's not working too well. So here. There we go. That's good. Good there. This is his casualty form. On the casualty form, when you get the service record, you will be able to find out where he fought, what units he fought in, because the unit that he was sent to England in isn't necessarily the unit that he ended up in France or Belgium with. Some soldiers never made it that far. This will tell you everything. It will tell you if he was wounded, if he was killed in action, again, what unit he would have been transferred to, where he ended up, when he proceeded to Canada to be discharged, and just about everything else. If you're looking to find out where your soldier has fought, it's basically a process of deduction. You're going to have to know what unit he was in and where that unit was on a particular day. For instance, the Battle of Vimy Ridge was on April the 9th, Easter Sunday, April the 9th, 1917. Well, if he wasn't wounded, and he wasn't in a hospital, and he wasn't somewhere else in another unit, you can determine if he was in the 3rd Battalion that he would have been at Vimy Ridge. We don't know what actually he did, or what company he was in, but he would have been at Vimy Ridge. So basically you have to do a little bit of use your intelligence a little bit, and the process of elimination. This is just another form that's very similar to the one I just showed you. You will also have pay records in here. If he was a single person, he would have a copy of his will. This happens to be a war service gratuity, which they've written in here not applicable. If he was eligible, he would have gotten a sum of money on discharge, or his next of kin, or his wife.
If they were wounded?
Sorry?
If they were wounded, they would have got that?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. No, when I say most people, a lot of people wouldn't have gotten a war service gratuity because they weren't in the war. They basically never passed in. So these are all pay records. Sometimes when you get a war, if you're not interested in pay records, you can tell Library and Archives to eliminate them on the order form. Again, they can be quite extensive. So that's what a service record looks like. I have some on the table over here. I should add that I have a bunch of books and research material that I've been using, and I'm welcome to look at. Other information includes on Library and Archives Canada. If your soldier had a court-martial, you can check on the court-martials, the search, And you'd be surprised how many soldiers are listed under here for relatively minor offenses. Things like being in an estimate after 8 o'clock at night or something like that. He's eligible for court-martial, different types of court-martials. Court-martial 1, court-martial 2, court-martial 3, and they all have different penalties. 3rd Battalion. I don't know how many of you know this, but in Toronto's old City Hall, there is a huge plaque inside the front door that lists all the fallen from the 3rd Battalion. And if you think that your family member might be on that, you can go take it. Unfortunately, it's very hard to photograph individually, but all the names of the fallen from the 3rd Battalion are on there. What else? I was going to show you. Well, here we are. Okay. These are the things that our Library and Archives Canada currently have that you can search, besides the attestation records. Okay. These are all not World War I. Some of them are obviously other conflicts. But when you're talking about World War I, you can also find your unit war diary. If your father fought in the 3rd Battalion, the war diaries are online, and you can read the war diaries day by day and find out if, where he was. Again, it helps locate where he was on a particular day.
They're also on the museum website now.
Oh, are they really? Okay. I didn't know that. Oh, that's right. I did know that. I'm sorry. They were all transcribed by volunteers. Military medals. One I was looking for was that. Well, these are other links to other people's research. The War Museum, Veteran Affairs has a list of files. They're not online yet, but they are online, but they're hard to search. All the death cards from veterans in World War I, and you can whether they died from war-related injuries or wounds or diseases, or whether it was just a simple death that was reported at Veteran Affairs. You can find the death card. You can find links to home children or Bernardo kids. If you're researching your relative and you find that, let's say he's a younger person and he's a farmer and he doesn't have any next of kin, and he's probably from the UK, there's a good chance he's a home child. And there's a whole list of home child's research that you can do, starting with when he arrived and where he arrived in Canada. I'll talk a little bit about my grandfather, how I started researching my grandfather. The family history had that he had fought in the First World War, which I was told for a number of years. It didn't really read much. But then my aunt said, well, I want to learn more about your grandfather. So she gave me a cigarette box, or a cigar box, I guess it was, with some postcards and his medals. And that led me on a search that continues to this day. This is one of the postcards that was in the cigar box, and the original actually is on the table over there in one of the folders. This postcard is entitled "Friends of my Grandfather." These are 8 NCOs. Most of them were company sergeant majors that were actually friends of my grandfather. Out of the 8, 5 of them were killed before 1917. Their names are on the back of the postcard. I've actually written a blog on these fellows. And yes. So I should back up, I guess. My grandfather was an American. On his attestation paper, and I'm not sure what I did here. Yeah, I did. He came up from Connecticut under, here it is. You can see, it says he was born in Ireland, Kilkenny County, Kilkenny. Well, we found out subsequently that's a lie. He was actually an American citizen. His parents came from Canada. So he lied, which is not unusual on these attestation papers. At the time, he thought that was the only way he could get into the CEF. As it turned out, because his parents were British subjects, he could have joined anyway, but he didn't know that at the time. He lists that he was in the U.S. Marine Corps. I haven't been able to substantiate that information either. But he came up from Bridgeport, Connecticut, into Montreal, thinking he was going to join the Princess Frats, which were the first privately organized battalion. And they had already organized and headed over to England. So he ended up in a unit called the 23rd Battalion in Montreal. 23rd Battalion ended up being a total reinforcement battalion. All the men from the 23rd Battalion reinforced existing battalions that were already overseas. So he ended up being transferred to the 3rd Battalion, and in a very short time became a corporal, senior corporal. In October 31st, 1915, when the battalion was in the trenches in Flood Street Woods, just outside of Ypres, he was captured by the Germans, but when he was leading the patrol, and spent the rest of the war as a prisoner of war. So that's my story of the story of my grandfather, and that postcard that I showed you was sent to him when he was in a prisoner of war camp. So again, this is fairly straightforward. The back of it, and I guess I didn't take a picture of the back, has medical information. It just a description of the soldier, the height, the weight, the religion, and it's signed by the medical officer of the battalion at the time to say that he's in good health and can join. So again, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for this piece of paper, and when you find this piece of paper online, that leads you to all kinds of avenues and doors. Any questions up to now? This is another link in Library and Archives Canada. I opened this earlier. This is a member of, a well-known member of the 3rd Battalion, William Beverly Crawford, that came from a very, very well-known family in Toronto. Who was captured killed at Ypres. But this shows that he was, actually I need to back up on that. This shows that he did get a medal, honor, and award. And we know I captured the right page, but he won the medal, was awarded the Belgrade Cross. I have to be careful. I keep saying win. You don't win medals, you get awarded. Where else can we go? Okay, if you want to order the service record, this has all been changed in the last couple of weeks, so you'll have to bear with me. This is an example of how you would fill out the existing link online. Happens to be one for a teacher, but it's the same for everybody. You have to have the box number, and the box number, when you find the attestation number, is right on that page. It's the page before. So you've got to have that box number, and as long as you have that box number and the man's name and the man's service number, you can order the service record. And again, it's currently 40 cents a page from Library and Archives Canada. Good news in the last week, even when I started putting this presentation together, we just found out that one of the centenary projects of Library and Archives Canada is they're going to have all the service records digitalized in the coming year. So if you can wait, you'll find the whole file online. Some of them already are. If you order a file today and you get the digital CD or a download from Archives Canada, because they've already gone to digitize the service file, it will be put online for other people to look at. And that's how they're doing it currently. But again, they've been told that the project that's coming up in the next
little while, is to digitize all the service records. So that all 600,000 service records will be online. I'll just go through some of these pictures. This is Sidney Churchward, the guy who I was looking for. Some of you may know about Sidney. Sidney was a soldier that attested and was put in the 3rd Battalion. He fought at the Battle of Passchendaele. He was killed November 2nd, 1917, along with many other men from the 3rd Battalion. And again, that's the same day that Colin Barron was awarded the Victoria Cross for his actions at Pine Cottage. 3 bodies were found in 2004 in Passchendaele. One of the bodies had 3 gold teeth and a bunch of badges from the 3rd Battalion. Automatically, it was assumed that perhaps it might be our Sidney Churchward, because Sidney Churchward had 3 gold teeth. So the bodies were exhumed, DNA testing was done, and the DNA testing proved to be non-conclusive. So the 3 bodies were buried as 3 unknown men from the 3rd Battalion in New Passchendaele Military Cemetery, just outside the village. And they remain there to this day. I since have done a blog on Sidney Churchward, and some of his relatives in the UK have found the blog and contacted me and said, well, why was he buried unknown? They want to know why they weren't DNA tested. So I got caught in a hornet's nest, and this is presently being looked after by people in Ottawa. So there's a possibility that his grave might be identified if results are positive in DNA testing. So he lies in an unmarked grave in Passchendaele, but there's a number of us that are convinced that one of the soldiers is definitely Sidney Churchward.
So there's an office in Ottawa that their job is to...
It's part of the Canadian Army. It's called a Heritage Division of the Canadian Army. And there's a lady by the name of Laura Clay who oversees this type of thing. I should add, this isn't the only soldier that was found and identified. It's happening all the time with British soldiers and Australian soldiers. But it is. I also have a picture. I guess I didn't bring it. I have it on my website of a sergeant that was found in a particular area near Arras, where the 3rd Battalion was fighting, and we're pretty sure it's. I mean, there was only one soldier lost on that particular day that they had the gravestone, so we're pretty sure who it is. Apparently, we need more proof. So. And that's pretty much all I can add. I was hoping there were a few more questions that I could ask. Again, over on the table, I have some books. I have a book by Edward. Well, actually, 3 books by Edward Quigley, who was unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. He was the ultimate researcher. The big black book is a book of all the casualties of World War I, all the Canadian casualties. There's a book on all the prisoners of war, and there's a book of the service records. The service records you can identify what the soldier or what unit the soldier served in by the service record. So you're welcome to take a look at the books. I have some actual medals, medal sets, groupings, and I certainly we'll talk about the medals too. If you find a medal in a desk drawer and it has an inscription on the rim, a man's name and a number, there's a good chance it's a World War I medal. World War II medals were not inscribed, so that's the main difference. And there's a big market for buying and selling World War I medals, particularly valor medals. Well, anything else?
There you go. Thank you.
You're welcome.